One of the only things you have to bring to an ultimate tournament is your cleats. So every player has a cleat story. I was at Fall League a couple years ago and had to fully duct tape the bottom of my cleat back to the upper in order to continue playing. I think I still played in those for another couple weekends after that before getting a new pair. The good news is Tokai cleats are specifically designed for Ultimate, with a cleat pattern for the game's sharp cuts and a durable, breathable, supportive build to keep your feet and ankles protected and comfortable for longer. Hopefully you won't have to duct tape yours back together because they're built better than my cheap ones from Dick's Sporting Goods. Tokai cleats, as a result, are the official cleat of the U.S. national team, and they're on the feet of elite players like Robin Fennig, Antoine Davis, and Lev Kowalczak. Get your new favorite cleats at tokai-ultimate.com. Welcome to a live edition of the Deep Look podcast. We are live in the Ultiworld Discord with subscribers today. It is Tuesday, May 23rd, 7:50 p.m. start. And man, this is so much fun. Charlie Eisner joined by Keith Rayner, and we are ready to go for the D1 College Championships, which start in less than, 72 hours or something at this point. Friday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. Round one begins, and it's going to be a super fun one this year, Keith. I cannot wait. We had kind of a dull college nationals last year, and I think that we are absolutely not going to have that happen again.
I don't think so either. There is, one out to it being dull. If you're a fan of Dullsville, then there is an out there. But I do think that the way things are lining up with the talent that's on the board, it should be a pretty exciting one. I'm definitely looking forward to getting into it and seeing the teams once we're there in person.
So we've got a lot to get to today, of course. We're going to go through the pools, give some thoughts on all of the pools. We're going to make our picks, of course, for semis and finals. We're going to talk about potential dark horse candidates, player of the year stuff. So much to discuss. Keith, I kind of want to leave it to you to decide where you want to take us first.
Oh, wow. That's a big question. All right. Let's start in the men's division because that's the one that's in front of me right now. And when you look at these pools, let's start with, do you see a pool of death? Is there a pool of death among these four pools in the men's division?
Oh, man.
Or pool of life, if for those of you who caught our D3 previous show.
Listen, I think what I find interesting about this year's men's division is that there's not an obvious, one or two teams that are just like blowing everybody's doors off. I mean, sure, you can look at UNC and you can say that, but I feel like it's fairly flat after that. And so what really comes for me is like, I'm looking at the 3 seeds and I'm thinking to myself, where do I see somebody who looks pretty dangerous to me? And I think I have to say right now that probably I look at Pool B as my deathiest pool. Now, a lot of times people are going to say Pool D, but I think that trio of 4-5-9, always tough, Colorado, Pittsburgh, Texas this year. I just don't know if I buy Texas as a truly top level team, given that they're dealing with some injuries and that, they were a little shaky at regionals, Keith. But then I look at Minnesota, they come out, they win the North Central. We've seen the talent on this roster. Maybe it's finally coalescing. Brown obviously playing great. They feel so dangerous as a 7 seed. And if UMass is getting back healthy, which it sounds like they are, and they're going to be able to bring back the full complement of guys that took them to be the number 1 team in the nation after the Smoky Mountain invite, they could win a national championship this year. So that to me looks like a really tough pool with sleepers, Cal and Utah State in there. Cal's probably going to beat somebody with that zone. So that's where I go, Keith.
I'm 100% with you. I completely agree. I was hoping to catch you off guard on that one, but I'm with you that Pool B, and it's not just at the top. We've got a UMass team that, how much nationals experience is on this team again? How many of these guys have gone through the trials and tribulations? Not a lot. And then if you go down the line, you've got scary teams. You got the New England champ and a team with a lot of high level nationals experience in Brown. You got a Minnesota team that's come on strong this year. They're dangerous if they get hot, but they're not the scariest 3 seed. I don't necessarily think. And then I think Cal and Utah State each have the perfectly credible claims to being the scariest seed on their own line. So Pool B is definitely the one that feels like it could throw a wrench into things. Maybe Pool A, but the problem is that you have UNC who feels insulated from everything else. But after that, I think you get a really, really intriguing pool.
Sure. I mean, I can see Santa Cruz. I mean, I think Georgia's probably the most interesting 5 seed because we know that they have enough talent on the roster to do some damage. Now, they haven't really showed it to us very much this season, but I would not count them out at Nationals as a quarterfinalist. I don't think they're going further than that, but I think quarters is not out of the question. And, I know the Southeast isn't exactly a murderer's row or anything, but they handled their business in the postseason. So we'll see what happens with this Georgia team. But, I mean, come on. I still just feel like a team that has Aiden Downey and Adam Miller on the O-line should be an elite team. And they really haven't been that, but they could be. And they feel like a dangerous 5 seed.
I'm with you. All right. So I guess you want to go through pool by pool here and break it all down.
Well, let's do it. Let's start in Pool A. What do you think about this pool?
Well, I think it's really interesting that you've got this mix of teams. There's some familiarity among this group. There's connectivity between them. But also you've got an Oregon team that we've seen really play up at points this year. They're a young team. They're a fiery team. And I think that makes for a fairly compelling potential foil to UNC. I mean, I don't expect UNC to take a loss, but I do think this is the type of team who I can imagine beating a UNC just if they get hot, just if they get confident. You've got some really scary defenders on that team, but that also means that volatility can lead to them being upset by teams that are really good beneath them. Santa Cruz, obviously, they're going to be new guys on the block, and I think that probably is going to work to their detriment. But I think they're going to come out with a lot of energy. They know they can beat this Oregon team. I think they're going to feel confident in their other matchups too. I think Tufts has looked really solid. I'm like increasingly every time that I watch film of Tufts, I come away feeling a little bit better about them. And Georgia, it's hard not to remove the visions from that winter run to the final. But other than that, this team really has never done anything. So I want to get excited for the reasons that you're naming. I look at the names on the roster and I'm like, wow, this team's talented. And you see some flashes, I guess. They beat Pitt, I guess, at warm up. That's a nice win. And they've put up some good results. It's not like they're not competitive, but right. What have they really done when it's mattered? Nothing for 2 years. So I look, all that said, that's why they're a 5 seed. As far as 5 seeds go, yeah, they're pretty damn scary. So Pool A, it's hard to figure exactly what's going to go on. And I think that makes it all the more likely that UNC is probably going to sit in a pretty spot because the teams below them are going to have to worry about every other game in their pool. So I think people are going to take their foot off the gas against UNC pretty early to make sure that they're good for the rest of Pool A.
I think one question I have in my mind coming into this tournament is how good is this Southwest trio going to be? Because Slugs loses close to Cal at regionals by a goal, and then they lose close to SLO. And we saw SLO at Easterns look like a pretty solid team. And so I'm wondering, and of course, Santa Cruz won the Stanford Invite. Now, I know that it was not quite the Stanford Invite of the past, and certainly not as strong as some of the other tournaments this season, but they still beat Oregon and SLO to win that tournament. So, I feel like I'm pretty curious to see how this whole grouping does. I feel like Santa Cruz, when I watched them play early in the season and the tape that I've seen of them, they're a tough, big, athletic team. And I think that they're going to potentially pose some very difficult matchup problems for some of the other teams, specifically in this pool. I look at a team, obviously they're going to feel good about their match with Oregon. And they're probably going to get crushed by UNC. Fine. They probably won't even necessarily try.
They're lucky. They're lucky Emory's not in their pool.
But it's not out of the question to me that they could finish second in this pool because I think they're going to be physically dominant against Tufts. And I'm not sure that Georgia is deep enough to beat Santa Cruz, which sounds kind of crazy. But I don't know. That one seems like it's going to be a lot of fun. UCSC, Georgia. There's some really good throwers on both teams, and I think we could see kind of a shootout game.
And you're talking about physicality,
by the way.
Those are two teams that are going to be physical.
Yes. Okay, let's move over to Pool B. Obviously, we'll get to our picks in a little while. UMass, Brown, Minnesota, Cal, and Utah State. So we've already talked a little bit about it. I mean, I don't really know how to handicap the top of this pool. I mean, I think it's probably going to come down to that New England matchup. I think UMass gets the better of Brown this time around. This is assuming that they're back to full strength. And, that's maybe not an assumption that I should make. I don't know what the latest on Jonas Stang Osborne is. He's been pretty important for their D-line, but even more important is going to be the status of Wyatt Kellman, who's probably their best player this season and hasn't really played since Smoky Mountain. If he's back and he's at 100%, I think UMass has a very good chance to kind of be the team that we saw earlier in the year and be a semis team and be a true, championship contender, the team that beat UNC. Without that, I think they could maybe lose to Brown and end up in like a tough quarterfinal matchup, and maybe we see them bounce out in quarters, or even, dare I say it, pre-quarters. I don't think that's likely, but I do think that UMass has sort of been trending in the wrong direction since SMI, but that's been largely, I think, due to health. So that makes this an interesting top of the pool situation. And then I think the question is, can any of these teams below really challenge those top two? I'm not sure that I've seen enough consistency from Minnesota, particularly from their D-line, to feel like that's going to happen with the teams at the quality that Brown and UMass have shown. And I think Brown should be considered more like a 3 or a 4 seed at this tournament. I know they're the 7, but that's just because they had some slower results at the beginning of the year. To go out there and win New England Regionals shows you what you need to know. Cal could give teams problems, though. I don't know how effective their zone is going to be in the totally pleasant conditions that I'm expecting us to have. But I don't think it's out of the question that they make the bracket. And then, Utah State's going to be a punchy 5 seed. They've been to nationals and they've got their guys back, Keith.
I agree. And, Cal is another team that it's hard to get a read on for me. I look at their results and, like, honestly, outside of beating UCLA in that crucial game, their regionals isn't that impressive. They lose by 4. They barely beat Stanford, and they beat Santa Cruz 9-8. That's a good win too. But yeah, they're not blowing me away, but I do like the makeup of the team. I like the Gavin May, Dexter Clyburn pairing. I like that they have a style of play and they don't care who knows about it. Like, sure, watch the tape or whatever. We execute, and that's what we can do. They've got good young guys. So there's a lot of buy-in. I like Cal, and I think Minnesota is not necessarily a scary 3 seed for them to have to deal with. I think they're going to feel comfortable with that. And sometimes we've seen that zone really be a way to level out the game against teams that might be more accomplished than they are. So even I don't think they're going to be afraid to go up against Brown and UMass, although I do think both those teams are pretty well situated to do well against Cal.
Let's not forget, Keith,
they're punchy.
Cal went 5-2 at Easterns. Mm-hmm. Now they had some of their wins were against weaker teams, but they played close with Pitt, and they got 2 wins against NC State, and they beat Carleton. Like, those are quality national level wins, and I think the teams in the Southwest, frankly, it's like an NFL divisional game. They know that zone a lot better than the teams out east, and that makes a difference. They've had a lot of reps playing against Cal and figuring out how to go against that zone, but other teams struggle against that. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see them give, I don't think UMass or Brown are going to lose to Cal, but Minnesota, Utah State, sure.
Yeah, but I mean, you're talking about UMass and Brown. That I think they're in good spots to be good against the zone. I mean, I think that plays to their strengths. Sure. Not so much Utah State, who I think wants to get out there and sling it a little bit.
They want to be running.
They can out-muscle teams. I think that's possible. It's an interesting pool, and making my picks for that pool is going to be difficult.
Let's go to Pool C. It's Vermont, Cal Poly SLO, Carleton, NC State, and Michigan. This is definitely the weirdest pool. Keith, your thoughts?
This feels to me like the most likely pool to go to chalk. of all of them. And that's in part because I really don't buy the bottom two seeds, but also that I'm not sure I really believe in Carleton's ability to threaten the top two seeds. So like really the only question for me is Vermont and SLO. I'm sure I am setting up some crazy upset right now. I'm speaking it into existence. Suhas Madaraju just like totally clamps Cal Poly SLO's offense by himself. He and Sean Wiles just take over. Zach Cools can't be stopped. Yeah, I don't know. But I like that Vermont SLO matchup. I think Vermont's for real. I do think that getting to play in the elite level tournaments that they have is going to season them in a way that they wouldn't otherwise necessarily get. Like, I think they need those challenges to get better, to figure out how to bounce back against good teams. That's something that Cal Poly SLO is going to have plenty of experience with. I think there's going to be questions for health about SLO. There always are. I mean, can you ever remember a year in which you weren't like, well, what about this SLO guy who's missing from the roster? I don't know. I talk about this on the podcast all the time, but I kind of want to see who's going to be in and out of the lineup for them. You know, will they have James Robinson? Will they have Garrett Bush? Like, I don't know what to expect from that group, but I do like SLO on paper. But that Vermont matchup, that 1-2 matchup is very, very compelling, even if the rest of this pool doesn't really get the juices flowing for me.
This is a nightmare matchup for Vermont. Let us not forget that SLO embarrassed them on the stream 12-8 at Easterns in what Vermont said was their worst game of the season. And I think it's true. Now, the thing is, you could just say, oh, you know, you just chalk it up. It was a bad game for Vermont. Or you look at it and you say, SLO caused them major offensive problems throughout that game. And now they're going to have that matchup again. Cody, of course, is not telling us whether anybody's hurt or not. This is, I think that USCU should fine Cody Mills personally $1,000 for not telling us if players are hurt or not. I'm really interested in this SLO team. I think that they have a chance to be an outside semis team. Like, it is possible, but they have to pass this first test against Vermont, and they can't ask for a better one seed in their pool than Vermont, right? They're going to be like, yeah, we killed these guys.
You're qualifying it a lot. I have no qualms. I definitely think they're a semis quality team. Like, I think that we can go pretty deep with teams that I can see in semis.
Well, that's what's so interesting about this season. If we just want to back up for 1 second as we dig into all these pools, I think that there's a lot of depth of potential semis teams this year. I really go at least 7 seeds deep, and then I still maybe could squint and see another 1 or 2 teams in the semis conversation. And that is not always the case. I think it's pretty flat. You know, after UNC, it feels very flat to me from UMass all the way down to Brown. You know, I'm not sure if I buy Oregon. Do you buy Oregon as a semis team, Keith?
No, I do. Like I said, I do think that they're good enough to beat semis teams, if that makes sense. I have trouble seeing them stringing it together consistently, but I think that they could beat basically anybody in this tournament in just a one-off.
Anyway, back to just the pool C. I think it's going to be a dull pool, frankly, outside of that top game. I'm kind of on board with you. I mean, Michigan has shown us nothing this year. NC State, good for them for winning the AC lottery, but they're not going to do anything at nationals. Carleton is good, but they're like a year or two away from being like a really good team. I think they're going to be a little too predictable offensively with what they're trying to do for the teams like Vermont and Cal Poly to lose to them. And so while I think that they have like some nice high ceiling guys, and obviously just a tremendously talented freshman leading the way, I just don't necessarily think that they have enough down the roster. And at the end of the day, Declan Miller's still a freshman. It's hard to go to college nationals and like carry when you haven't done it before. But if anybody could do it, it's probably him.
I mean, Charlie. I think Declan Miller's the best player in this pool. I'm not
best
kidding.
Player in this pool?
Yeah, I do think that.
Wow.
I mean, maybe I give it to Turner Allen, but he's really good.
Now I'm like thinking of all the players on these rosters.
That's it. He is still a freshman. He is still a freshman. It's true. And yeah, and their second best player is a sophomore. So it's
is there any other freshman who has a chance to steal Rookie of the Year at Nationals away from Declan Miller?
Yeah, Max DeLynn definitely would be second on my list. Gavin Abrahamson
seems like a long,
but
yeah, I mean, those guys have been good, but
I think you need Declan Miller to go out and play poorly. Like if he plays
have to be bad.
Even like median, I think he's got its own up. I think this is actually true in both divisions. So we could have the same conversation when we get to the women's division. But yeah, the hyped prospects have really lived up to it this year.
Definitely. Let's move to Pool D. Colorado, Pittsburgh, Texas, Washington, and Cornell. This Colorado Pitt matchup is going to be the one that people focus on. And I think, gosh, it's too bad that Texas, isn't going to be all the way there because Matt Chambers is hurt and he won't be playing. So, or, is going to be limited if he tries to play, I guess. It's hard for me to see Texas having the same ceiling as they had earlier in the year. But Colorado and Pitt, that should be a great one. They played at SMI. Colorado won 13-11. And I always feel like Pitt plays its best ultimate, except for the weird COVID year at Nationals. And down the way, like, does Washington have a chance to knock off those top two? Does Texas? I mean, I don't think Texas even ended up playing Colorado at regionals because they lost to Wash U in, I guess, I can't remember if it was pool play or bracket play, but they ended up beating Wash U in the game to go. They never played Colorado. The last time they played Colorado was at Centex, and they lost 14-13 in a barn burner. So I don't want to write Texas off. I still think they finished third in this pool, but it's hard for me to see them beating Colorado or Pitt given the current situation.
No, Matt Chambers is good. I guess there's an argument that he would be the best player on the team healthy, but I don't get the sense that they're dependent on him. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Like obviously losing good players impacts your ability to be good. Like I get that. And Texas has never built a reputation for consistency. In years we've seen talented Texas teams play up and down. So that's
they still have a lot of good players, Keith.
But yeah, there are plenty of good players left on this roster and guys who can easily run their offense. They still have Zach Slayton and John Clyde and Xavier Fuzat. Like their offense is going to be fine. And I don't worry about I don't think I exposed them to an upset, and it wouldn't shock me for them to get one over on Pitt. I think I'd be surprised by Colorado, even though they've played such close games this year, just because Colorado's going to be so familiar with them. So that part might surprise me a little bit. I also think Colorado is probably a good matchup, or is going to feel good about matching up with Pitt more than they might some of these other two seeds. But they're so big and athletic that I think they can slow down Pitt and make Pitt try and be execution heavy team, which Pitt can do, but doesn't always do successfully.
Pitt is such an interesting team. Like they've had some serious ups and downs this season. But I feel like they, more than a lot of teams, they're just willing to grind all the way deep into a game. I mean, what was that game at Easterns against UMass, right? When they handed UMass their first loss of the year. I mean, that game was insane. Mm-hmm. And it was just total grind from Pitt the whole time. And, Henry Ing could easily be the best player in Nationals. And if he is, how far does that take Pitt? Could be a long way. Yeah, I think my questions about Pitt come in more in the semis conversation.
Yeah, and I think that their performance is generally going to be dependent on what happens after Henry Ing. How good is Marcel Oliart playing, or Harry McNamara, Peter Kotz? I think at this point we're pretty good on your Scott Haymans and
Yarder.
Yeah, Yarder, probably Dylan Garrett. Like I feel pretty confident about those guys. How is everybody? But what level are those guys bringing to the table?
I'm ready for Kevin the Aiden Landis breakout.
There's a lot of Aiden Landis hype. I'm definitely hearing Aiden Landis hype. He's had a great year. I'm not kidding. That was not a joke. I wasn't being.
No, I know. I agree with you. He played very well at Easterns.
As far as Washington and Cornell go, I've given up hope that this Washington team is like asleep. They're doing what Brown was doing in the beginning of the year. That we were kind of just waiting on them. I think that what they've put on record is pretty much who they are. They are certainly a good team. Don't get me wrong. You know, they're a good team, but they don't feel like the threat that they have in past years. Plus, we've just seen them not deliver a couple years in a row. So, you know, maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the bulletin board material they need, or they need to not have the pressure on them and people having high expectations. But yeah,
their best chance here is beating Texas and getting a pre-quarter spot, and then losing in pre-quarters. I mean, that's where it is for me. I think it would be a nice season for them if they get to pre-quarters. Okay, I think we should save our picks for the end for semis.
Agreed.
So we'll move over to the women's division.
Well, let's stop and do you want to stop and take some questions? If we got any questions in here,
we can take some questions. It's a good chance for
Feel
questions.
free to drop some more questions in the chat.
Jeremy asks, is the Southwest being slept on again?
I mean, what does that mean? I think there's pretty healthy respect for the Southwest teams, right?
Well, at least for the Cal Poly Slow. I mean,
we just talked about Cal and Santa Cruz. I think we both said good things about both of them. So I don't know.
Who is your dark horse championship team? I guess we can answer that now, but it doesn't necessarily spoil our picks.
How dark?
You can't pick a 1 seed, a pool 1 seed. Yeah. You can't pick a 1 seed to have a dark horse. I think I'll allow a 2 seed.
Yeah, for a champion to win a championship.
Dark horse.
Slower Brown, I think. I feel like Pitt is like a 1 seed, basically. So yeah, I guess Slow or Brown. Slow feels like a dark horse pick. I don't think anybody's picking Slow. I mean, I've seen what the Beach Charlie Challenge is. I'll drop the numbers on you after you make your pick.
Oh, nice. I feel like Brown is definitely a sleeper, and maybe it won't feel that way anymore to people because they won the region, but. You know, it's not like they did. They did not have the resume of a championship team during the regular season.
No,
but for them to go out there and win New England regionals, I don't know. The problem is they're just not deep enough.
They're post Randolph. I think they're definitely a sleeper.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's expecting them to go. What percentage of entries in the Beach Charlie Challenge do you think have picked UNC?
Men's? Oh boy, I'm gonna go 90%.
To win the championship?
Yeah. Is that too crazy?
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
I don't know what's their true odds. Their true odds is probably like 65 to 75%. So I will say that. I will say 70%.
They're at 54% right now.
That's not enough.
54% them, 16% on UMass. Everybody else is under like 7%. Surprised how little Colorado there is so far. There's definitely more picks to come in. We've got about 200 entries. I'm sure we're going to get more.
How many pools go to seed, Keith? That's a question from Hoffman in the chat.
How many pools go to seed? All the way up and down. I'm going to say 1 in men's division.
I'm going to say 2.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 1.
I think I'm also going to go with 1. I think
it's pretty hard. It's like a hard parlay to hit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. It is.
All right. Jeremy asks, if UNC wins again, where does this team stack up with previous Dark Side champions? I mean, I kind of want to see them play before. Like, I want to see them play at nationals before I really make that dictation and see, how do they compare? It's totally the crucible. I'm a big believer. It's why our awards are so nationals focused. It's like, all right, everybody's geared up for this tournament. You're only playing top level teams. Like, everybody's like mostly on an even playing field. So, I don't know. I'd have to see them, but I feel like I prefer the earlier Dark Side teams because they had like basically a clear top 3 player in the division on them, as well as being deep. You had,
I think that's the problem with this year's UNC,
you had
right?
Matt Gushohannes, like you had like the guys, and I don't know if this team has that, but maybe they do. Maybe Ben Dameron, maybe Rutledge Smith,
maybe they are those dudes.
Maybe Dylan Hawkins.
They were so good at Easterns. I mean, if they play like they did at Easterns, they're going to win the tournament easily.
I mean, come on, yeah. Like as Cody brings up that 2021 fall dark side. I mean, Alex Davis was like the third or fourth best guy on the team. That's ridiculous.
I don't feel like we should count that year because of the weird bonus players. It feels unfair. If you're comparing it only to a sort of a normal college season, I still think I'd take like, when they went in 2015? They won the year after Colorado won, right? That team was really good. With like Snell, I think, was still on the team. I don't know. I'd have to go back to it, but I don't think this is the best dark side we've seen. Though they're so deep. They might be the deepest they've ever been. That's
deep. before we see them go through nationals. So I think we'll find out. We're going to learn a lot more about them.
Cody says UNC has 5 U24 players, so they arguably have 5 of the top 25 players in the division, plus the clear best player in the division, Dylan Hawkins, who somehow, Keith, didn't make the U24 team.
I don't know how it's possible. The math's not math.
The fix was in. Oh yeah, Emmett, thank you. 2015 was the year that UNC beat Oregon in the finals in a complete wipeout. Like that Dylan Freechild's last year, and like they were this incredible offensive juggernaut that played no defense and like crossed over guys to get their breaks, and they'd get like 2 breaks a game, and then
I've never seen a team.
And then UNC just pummeled them. It was insane.
I've never seen a team so good at jamming it up the jam hole. I mean, just elite, straight up the open sideline offense from that Oregon team. And UNC was like, no, thank you.
That's a throwback. Yeah. Emmett mentions that UNC beat Florida State. Or no, it was Ego that beat Florida State in semis, right? And boy, that was a fun year.
And weren't all those teams in the same pool that year?
Oh, that's right.
I think all those teams were in the same pool because we still had regional locking.
Oregon lost at regionals and was a 4 or a 5 seed in their pool and was clearly a top 3 team at the tournament. That was wild.
Wild times.
Okay, let's keep it moving. We're going to go over to the women's division. And of course, UNC number 1 seed. Keith, I think I'll open up the thing with the same question you asked me before. Do we have a pool of death? And if so, which is it?
Charlie, honestly, I don't know that we do. I don't know. I've ever looked at the pools and been like, none of these seem like that much harder than any of the other ones to me. I guess like I see a pool that might be like weaker than the other ones, but there's no pool that I'm like, wow, I can't believe how stacked this pool is. I do feel like the ordering makes a lot of sense in the women's division. You know, if you squint and you're like if we were preseason mode, I'd be talking about Pool C. But UC Santa Barbara just hasn't been that team this year. So, your mileage with Oregon may vary. I think if you had to pick, I'd pick Pool D, but I really don't think that there's a pool you would call a pool of death. Am I crazy?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I'm looking at the 3 seeds and I'm asking myself, who's the toughest 3 seed? And I think the answer is Oregon, which kind of automatically makes Pool D the pool of death because of the nature of that 4-5-9. And, the thing is, like, the Money Melons are in that pool. And why aren't we talking about that already?
Get your Money Melons out, baby. I really can't wait to see what cheers and celebrations they bring.
I don't know how many goals they're going to score, Keith.
You do not have to score to celebrate.
Pool. That's a fair point. Okay. I think I say D, just because. But here's the problem. The reason it doesn't feel like there's a pool of death is because it doesn't feel like there's a world in which Oregon beats Vermont or Tufts. Right? Do you see that?
Yeah, that's mostly the size of it to me.
There's just the 3 seeds don't feel threatening to the top 2 seeds.
Feisty, but they haven't gotten the wins. It's been a lot of like, oh, we played really tight with a top level team. They played tight with UBC. They played tight with Colorado. But the W's aren't there. So they played tight with Stanford way back when. But yeah, they haven't been able to get the wins.
Yeah, and like look at the results.
They're so young.
Oregon. They're so young. I mean, they're going to be a really good team in a year or two. But
They're going to be absolutely out of
Northwest
control.
Regionals, they lost by 8 to UBC and by 5 to Washington. They're just not in that tier, and that's the 9 seed, Keith. And that's the thing. The top 2 seeds in each division, just a big step up from the rest of the tournament. I would be kind of shocked if we didn't see all 8 of the top seeds at this tournament not advance to the bracket. Like, I think that's your quarterfinalists.
Yeah,
I don't see where the upsets are coming.
As our D1 women's editor, Jenna Weiner, who's here, notes, differentiation feels a lot like club women's in 2022, where like the cutoff after the top 2 seeds feels pretty stark. Like you got a cliff. And I fully agree. It feels like we have a big fat tier of teams that want to make it to the bracket to quarters and semis and finals could be absolutely wild. But the pool setup just looks like chalk from at the top anyway.
It looks like it, but will it be? That's always it's why
it never is the way it seems, right?
Let's go to Pool A. UNC, Washington, Colorado State, SUNY Binghamton, and UCLA. Keith, your thoughts on Pool A?
Charlie, we get the Pody matchup. Not that we've never seen it before, but it has produced fireworks, and they often do match up against each other. Abby Hecko and Dawn Colton. I mean, what more can you ask for, really? That's showtime right there. 2 reigning Podies, unheard of to see them match up against each other, but they'll be going up against one another in pool play. But I don't think anybody's looking at this Washington team and quite thinking they're the same as they once were. The record just doesn't speak to that. They have a 13-10 win over UBC at their first tournament, both teams' first tournaments at Stanford Invite. But since then, they haven't beaten anybody who's seated above them. I don't even know if they've really been a big threat to do that. I guess they beat Oregon seated below them. Yeah, so they've not beaten anyone above them. They gave a scare to Carleton, but I don't think anybody's afraid of Washington like that. And after that, you hit that cliff, and are people worried about Colorado State? Like, I think I've been higher on Colorado State, I think, than most people, but I don't know if I'm ready to pick them going over Washington. I've been higher on Bing than most people. Same deal. And UCLA survived the Southwest, so I do think they're pulling it together at a time. Like they're not going to be a pushover 5 seed. I think they're probably the best 5 seed, and obviously they're the highest seeded one. But I think they're probably the best one. So yeah, pretty typical A setup here. 1 looks far away, but 8 looking far away from 12, 13, and 17 is a little bit of a wrinkle.
You calling a Binghamton pre-quarters run here?
It definitely could happen. I think that they could beat Colorado State. I think Colorado State's still the favorite going into that game. I'd say you're probably talking like Colorado State -2.5 or -2, but a Bing upset is possible. Jolie Krause, maybe. I don't know if they're going to be able to dangerous. Match up with Willow Purvis, though.
They're dangerous. I don't really have much to add here. I think UCLA could finish 3rd in this pool. And
that is 100% possible.
Like I said, I'm not going to be picking any of the bottom 3 seeds to pick off one of the top 2. I do not see it happening. I don't see it happening here. And Washington is good, but they're not good enough to beat UNC. So it'll be fun at the bottom of that pool. Who gets that the last pre-quarter spot? Should be cool.
Let's go pool B. It feels pretty even for those 3. And that's a refrain we're going to repeat.
Right. Colorado, Stanford, Northeastern, Virginia, and Georgia is your Pool B. This is kind of a cool first test for Colorado to have to pass. I can't remember what year it was, but there was a year a few seasons ago, I think before the pandemic, and maybe it was Oregon that had to play Stanford in pool play. And I remember thinking to myself, nobody wants to play this Stanford team at Nationals. And then I think Stanford won the game. It was a big upset, and I don't think Stanford beats Colorado, but I also know just how good the coaching is for this Stanford team, and I will not count it out completely. They've played twice. It was 4-point wins for Colorado both times. It certainly suggests that Colorado should be probably a 3.5-point favorite here. But I think that game is going to be interesting, Keith. I've steadily gotten more impressed by Stanford this whole season.
100% with you on that. I think they've got talent. They've got players who can perform against these top level players. And then they do the best just to squeeze the most out of all their inexperienced players, all their players who, maybe flawed, maybe they're one dimensional or something like that, or inexperienced, and somehow they get the most out of them. But I like the Stanford team a lot, and they're going to scheme well. So I do think they're a great test for Colorado, but I also don't think they're just a test. I mean, I think that if Stanford wins that game, I would not be shocked.
What, I guess my question, of course, is going to be about that Northeastern Virginia combo. I'm not sure that I see Georgia beating any of the teams in this pool. Northeastern got the better of Virginia earlier this year, but it was very close. They matched up twice. One was a blowout, and one was 9-8 in the bracket at Commonwealth Cup. I kind of feel like I'm going to take Virginia in this rematch, Keith, and I think Virginia is going to get the 3 spot in this pool. And I don't really know that I can necessarily tell you why I think that, given the fact that Northeastern has clearly, been the better team so far this season. I just feel like at times it's like Northeastern is a little reliant on its top players, and Virginia feels like a team that has sort of slowly been building over the course of the year. Something about it tells me it's hard to beat a team 3 times.
Yeah, and the Virginia team that was at Commonwealth was very incomplete, especially on day one during the blowout. They were missing people. I can't remember if it was for illness. I think they had the team had an illness go through the team, so they were missing people for the first round, and then they ended up playing each other the second time, and it was super close. And I agree with your assessment. I think Northeastern's got a stronger top end. I do think that they are. People, it's easy to be like, oh, it's Claire Stewart and friends. And I do not think that's an accurate read on this team. I think that their top, 4 or 5 are legit, but I don't think they go deeper than that. And Virginia, they do have top players. They do have, 3 or 4 players who I think are pretty strong, but they don't go as deep, but they are always good at system. They're just always a good system team. They always execute well. They always play hard defense. And that carries them, and they're super experienced. They've done nationals so much. I think it's easy to overlook how long, we've gotten so used to the level of excellence that Virginia's brought to the region. There's a stable team. And it's maybe a little cliche, but I think it may come down to how their best players play. Claire Stewart versus Kira Flores, Elise Freeman versus Aviva Costa, those not necessarily one-on-one matchups, but which one of those players are winning their matchups is, to me, probably going to define this matchup.
So let's move over to Pool C. Well, I guess before I do that, do you imagine a world, just to ask you, where Stanford drops a game to one of those teams, Northeastern or Virginia?
No,
or Colorado,
not really.
for that matter. Yeah. Okay.
No. I think that if Colorado played their worst game and Virginia played its best game, I'm still not sure Virginia would win.
Let's go to Pool C: UBC, Carleton, UCSB, UT Dallas, and Chicago. Keith, you're up first.
You get a mystery box here, Charlie. You get the Texas Dallas mystery box. Could be anything, even a boat, even a semifinalist, right? They're not undefeated anymore in D1 competition. They lost 15-3 to Colorado, and they also lost the game to WashU. So, they look like a 4 seed or a 5 seed. Depends on how we're looking at these setups. But UBC Carleton, definitely compelling again. When you segment into that top 2, you end up with pretty strong matchups. 2 teams that I think are strong on their skill level, great throwers, really experienced teams, a lot of youth level experience, so a lot of players who've had a lot of years beyond just their college seasons. So I think this should be pretty good. I think UBC is the more athletic team. I think a player like Andrea Moore could have a really good outing for them. But we've also seen UBC stumble. This is like a pretty typical thing for a UBC Thunderbirds team over the years. And I'm a little worried that it feels like, I don't know if we've seen that stumble yet. Yeah, they lost to Washington earlier on in the season, but I'm not even counting that. It's so early for them. But I don't know. I feel like they lay an egg during the postseason every year. And
here's where I'm at.
It's not the right time to have it.
Here's where I'm at. to me, this all comes down to this top matchup because I think winning this game is going to be very important to whoever wins to set themselves up on a good path towards semifinals. UBC and Carleton played last year. They have not played this season. They played last year in pool play at College Nationals. It was a 15-14 Carleton win. Now, obviously the teams are not the same, but take those two teams from last year, compare them to the teams from this year. UBC is clearly a better team. Carleton is clearly a worse team. That's all I need to know. I'm taking UBC in this matchup. I think that this UBC team is a clear championship contender. I mean, we're talking about essentially looking at the U24 Canadian women's roster out there. And I think that, it's going to be difficult, certainly, for them to beat Colorado in semis, who they would probably have to face, and then UNC in the final. Although, let's look back again to last year's Nationals. UBC and UNC played a very competitive and interesting quarterfinal game. Now, UNC was definitely the better team. I think they will still have that advantage this year, but I could see the margin being a little bit narrower. I think that UBC knows they can hang in that game. So, it starts here against Carleton. I have been a little lower on Carleton pretty much since the start of the season than some folks. I certainly think they deserve their 6th seed. But, when I look at the resume, I see them losing the key games this season, right? What's their best win? I guess 11-9 over Stanford back at Santa Barbara. And they beat them again at Northwest Challenge. They've lost their other games. They've lost close to Vermont and Tufts, and they got kind of beat down by Colorado. I think that they lose this game to UBC by 2 or 3 goals, and those two will mop up everybody else in this pool.
No credence for UC Santa Barbara, Julia Hasbrook, Devin Quinn combo.
I think they're good, but they just don't have the depth to hang.
Yeah, and I think UBC and Carleton are going to have answers. So, sure, we could turn around and they each have 10 assists across those 2 games, or 10 assists and 10 goals. But I'm super high on Devin Quinn, but yeah, just not enough depth for Santa Barbara. The foundation
is there for Santa Barbara to be a great team moving forward. And they're not, they're not the team that they were. They're still very good. I think they're going to have a hard time beating these teams in front of them this season.
I agree. I mean, they need to focus on making it out of the pool, I think.
I agree. Which they should be able to do fairly comfortably. I think UT Dallas and Chicago they're not going to be at the level of the other teams in this pool, nor do they have the experience at nationals that these other teams in the pool have. Pool D, Vermont, Tufts, Oregon, Victoria, and the Money Melons. This is going to be another fun one. Vermont and Tufts going at it yet again and battle back and forth. These two teams do. It was a 14-12 win for Vermont. And, at this point, Vermont is 2-0 against Tufts, but it certainly doesn't feel like a slam dunk that they're going to win for the 3rd time this season in pool play. I'm sure it's sort of annoying for them to have to play them in pool play, but I don't know. In some ways, maybe you'd rather have them than a Carleton or a Stanford in your pool, or even a Washington, just because you know the team and you know that you have kind of owned that matchup. And then, you've got kind of this like volatile young Oregon team that feels like they definitely have a chance to maybe put a team on upset alert if they get out to a hot start. And then you have 2 teams that I don't think are going to really compete with the other 3 in the pool. I think I see this pool going to seed, to be honest, but I think we're going to get some very entertaining games between those top 3 teams on our way to that.
Yeah, I think that 14-12 is close enough that it's obviously not a coin flip, but you can usually in a 14-12 game you could see like 2 or 3 things that if they go differently, the game goes totally differently. It feels different. But I think the Vermont probably matches up pretty well for Tufts. So I'd feel good, obviously, if I'm Vermont. I think they probably, I don't know, if you ask them, would they prefer to play a different team or would they prefer to get Tufts? I don't think they're going to complain on Twitter after what happened when they complained about Northwest Challenge. It didn't work out for them. Oregon, we talked about them. They could play up. They've shown that ability, but it just feels like they're going to do what they've done a couple other times, which is they put a scare into Vermont. Could I see Oregon taking half on one of those teams? Definitely. and then they lose, by 2. That feels like a very possible script to me. I kind of like UVic. Not enough to call them to like be one of the top 2 seeds. And I get it. You look at their resume, it's a lot of red. It's a lot of red. But I don't know, man. They played Oregon real close to conferences. They didn't play them again after that. They lost to Western Washington, but I don't know.
Keith, don't come here and be talking about conferences,
bro. That's
about conferences.
Look, if I pick UVic over Oregon, that may happen. I might talk myself into it.
That's crazy. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Below the 2 line, Charlie, anything can happen. It's wild. You got to give the chaos somewhere.
That's true. It's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. It always happens. So that brings us to the end of the pools here in the women's division. Questions, hit us up in the chat right now. We'll get to them. Overall, Keith, when you kind of look at the broad strokes of the women's division, I guess here's the question. How deep does the line go? I said that potential championship line goes 7 seeds deep in the men's division. How deep does it go in the women's division?
About the same, I think.
Really?
I'm buying on Stanford. So, yeah, I mean, with the caveat that like UNC is lording over everybody, but I could see any of those other teams beating Colorado. I could see any of those teams being in a final with UNC. So, like by that measure, that's about how far it goes. I mean, you could also make the argument that I see the championship tier going 1 team deep.
Well, I'm going to take a middle ground position there. I think it only goes. To be honest, I think it only goes 3 teams deep. I feel
to
now
me, definitely the 3
more or less
about.
the same way I felt at the beginning of the season, which is that UNC, Colorado, or UBC is going to win the title. And Vermont, I just don't feel like I've seen enough to say that they can do it. But I mean, they've played UNC decently close a couple times this year. Their only other loss is to Stanford. But that came on a weekend when they also, whooped up on Washington. I don't know. I just don't think there's quite enough there. They don't really have a great win. I take it back. They beat Carleton 9-8 at Queen City. That's their only like elite team win that they have, unless you count Washington. So
yeah, I don't think I do.
I remain a little skeptical. I think it's 3 teams. With UNC, obviously, I agree, being a clear favorite, but not an outright no chance the other teams win situation.
See, I see that. How much of a favorite do you feel like UNC is in each of these divisions? I mean, is it just like I think that we have some really interesting. Like we talked about how deep this contender pool goes for semis, but like, are they all just fighting for second place?
I said earlier that I thought it was about 65% for UNC men. I think it's 85% for the UNC women. Maybe 90%. I mean, they are a heavy favorite. They're a heavy favorite. But, if you priced out the Vegas odds and I got the field at something like plus 700 or something, I'm probably going to put a little on it. Because I think it's possible that Colorado or UBC could get the upset. The problem is those teams are going to meet in semis. So really only one of them is really going to get a shot at UNC.
Yeah.
Maybe Vermont can do it. Maybe Vermont's the right team to do it, Keith, and beat UNC in semis. Crazy shock. I'm not sure I think it's going to happen, but
hey, they were dogging Colorado last year. We know how that story ended, but like for a little while they were dogging Colorado.
They had us in the first half, not gonna lie.
But hey, if you can do that, that shows, if you get on a roll, they didn't have to play that well in the second half to win that game. They just had to play like better than the worst.
So let's do it, Keith. Let's make our semis picks. I mean, I'm already obviously telegraphing my three of mine already: UNC, Colorado, and UBC. And that fourth team, I'm going to stick with Vermont. I think that while I do believe Tufts has the chance to get the upset there, I don't think it's going to happen. And so I think we're going to see the top four teams kind of make it look pretty comfortable on their way to that semifinal spot.
All right, Charlie. There is a top four seed that I'm not going to pick to make semis.
Wow.
If we see this beautiful flat landscape of challengers, chalk just doesn't feel right to me. Who do you think I'm gonna remove from semis? Who do you think's going to be?
Oh God. I think you're thinking Stanford's going to get an upset in pool play or something. And then that's going to put Colorado into a matchup with, who would they be? If they're 2B, then they're going to end up facing off against UNC. So I guess Colorado.
You have perfectly nailed. We've been doing this podcast for 400 episodes, so you knew you would turn on the Keith brain and
let's go inside the mind of a Keith Raider.
Look. Do we not see this exact same script play out in the men's division? Remember when it was, UNC and Colorado, these are the 1 and the 2. We're going to see them battle it out in finals. Colorado loses to, was it SLO? Did they lose to a Southwest team? No less in pool play. And then they had to play UNC in quarters and they get knocked out. Liam Storms-Bowes, crazy Callahan. Sometimes what we think coming into the tournament is not necessarily what we get. And this Colorado team has had, I'm just so used to them having these not breakdowns, but the mental game is tough for them. They put a lot of pressure on themselves sometimes, I think. And Stanford's a perfect team to capitalize on that. I think Stanford's great at riding through stuff. So yeah, you know what? Do I think Colorado's the second best team? Well, that's a maybe. But do I think that they're like a championship caliber team? Do I think that they're the fifth best team if I'm going to have them at semifinals? No, that's not what I'm saying. But that's not really how the awards are pulled out here. Yeah,
it's about the path.
All it takes is you could slip up and still be a better team. So even if I think they're better than Stanford, which I do on paper, I still think that there's a possibility we get an upset. It's got to come somewhere. I thought about Carleton over UBC. I thought about both of those upsets too, seeing what I played around with some different looks, but I think this is where I'm going to land. So I've got UNC, Vermont, UBC, and Stanford with UNC playing Vermont and UBC playing Stanford.
I mean, Colorado beat Stanford 13-9 at Northwest Challenge, Keith, and they beat them 12-8 at Pres Day. I don't know. I agree. I agree that Stanford is a very tough team to beat at nationals, but I don't think that's enough there. From just a straight up talent perspective, the better team from you name an order 1 to 3, 1 to 7, 1 to 14, 1 to 20. I don't care what you choose. Colorado's better. That's going to overcome the systematic skill that Stanford has and the preparation and the coaching.
I agree. I am not picking the median outcome here in the bell curve. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We've seen teams that are better lose to teams that are less talented than them. And I think that Stanford's exactly the kind of team to maximize at the right time. Now, I do think this Colorado team is super focused, but we're not going to talk about them getting absolutely crushed by UNC.
Hard for me to care that much about that game. I mean, I care about it in the sense that it makes me feel like they maybe just aren't going to be able to hang with UNC, but they're missing the most important players on their roster. That has a major impact.
It does. I agree with you, but I think this is the best iteration of Stanford we've seen in recent years too. I think this is the most talented iteration we've seen in a couple of years.
You're taking UNC's Stanford, UBC, and Vermont, or are you taking Tufts?
Yep. No, those are the four I'm taking.
Okay. So I'll let you continue. Who are you taking as your finalist and who you got as your champ?
Well, the finalist part was easy for me. I'm taking UNC and UBC. And I think we get another final like last year. I think we get another one that's oh,
barn
UNC,
burner.
they're so good, and we just get this great battle for them, but ultimately they're just the superior outfit. They just have so many advantages. Their team is so experienced. They've been here so many times before. On top of the talent, they have the great coaching. They have the great system. It's just like, what's the weak point? You know what I mean? They have arguably the best player. Like they have the full hand. You know, I don't know if they stack the deck or what, but just whatever they pull out of the deck, it's always just the right card. So I think UBC is good enough to test them. We saw them play at Nationals last year, and they were evenly matched. Like we said, that UBC team has gotten better, but it's UNC for a reason. Like I know they've not given us any reason to doubt them at this point. None.
Zero. I mean, I think the only thing you could like try to talk yourself into is it like the pressure of trying to win again, and if like they face a little adversity, can they overcome it? But I think they can.
They don't even know. They don't know what losing is. You know what I mean?
I know.
Like,
I mean, I
if
think
they lost a game, like,
arguably is a risk.
Fall apart? Yeah,
that's a risk. No, they wouldn't fall apart, and they're going to beat most teams they play easily. They're not even going to have to play their top players that much to win a lot of their games in pool play. But if they're up against it against a top team, do they have the buttons to press to go out and win? They were pretty much in control most of that final last year. It was tight, but they didn't like fall behind. Can they go out and make up breaks? I think they can. It was the thing.
It was kind of it was a little upwind downwind, if I remember right. Last year's final.
It was a little tough to score in that.
I think that made it a little more likely to stay close because they were kind of just trading a lot. But
okay, so I think I'm clearly going to take UNC to make the final. This Colorado UBC game, man, that is going to be great TV. I think I got to take Colorado though. I mean, I hate to pick pure chalk, but when I believe it, I pick it. I'm not going to be picking chalk in the men's division. I can tell you that right now. I just don't. I think Colorado again just has that little bit more of an edge with the top players, and it's not like the Stanford matchup where I think that they sort of like out talent the team top to bottom. UBC is very talented, but do they have the top end that Colorado does with Palil and Bailey Shigley and Stacey Gaskill? I mean, these players are a major problem, and Stacey's going to be putting back of the end zone pulls out there, and I just think this team is destined to play UNC again in the final. And we've talked about these destiny games before, and it doesn't always work out that way, does it? But this feels like where it's
it basically feels like it never does, right? Remember the Carleton UNC
UCSD UCSD Dartmouth. I mean, I feel
true.
like that was the one we were circling, and it happened. But yeah, no, the UNC Carleton and
never materialized,
never came to be. But I don't know. This feels like one where it is really going to happen. And I'm taking it to happen. And the question, of course, is what's going to happen in that game.
And honestly, maybe it feels like a little bit like waving the white flag to think this way, but I kind of think I'm at peace with the idea of UNC winning and the tournament still being good if the quarters and the semis are compelling. If we have really exciting matchups, I mean, come on, semi Saturday is what it's all about anyway. Like, I think that would be a win for the division, and I still think that would be really entertaining. Somehow I think that the women's division can just lay down for UNC and still be good. Scott, somebody in the chat, Scott said that the Charlie said it's not as boring as last year, but you pick chalk. And yeah, chalk's boring, but this could be really good chalk. Really good games, and the better team wins. I think that'd be okay with that.
And I expect UNC to face multiple challenges. I think that they are going to have tough games in the bracket. At the end of the day, though, I am going to take them to win this tournament. I think that the combination of top level talent, the depth, the experience in these moments, being able to call back to last year, the continuity of the team playing together. I mean, just look at this. The talent on this roster is ridiculous, Keith. I mean, it's hard to believe some of these players are still in college, But
Well,
when you
because they
have
get extra
like
time to be in college.
Alex Barnett, I know. Alex Barnett, Don Colton, Ella Uke still just shredding in the cutting lanes. I mean, we've talked about this team ad nauseum. I know everybody understands it at this point, but like even as you go further and further down, Sydney Rader, Alex Hecht, it's Teresa Yu. It's nonstop great players. And I just don't think the other teams can match that. I just don't think they can match that. And I'm excited that we're going to get to see it all play out. And obviously, the biggest challenge for UNC of all is that every other team at this level has been thinking about how to beat them. And they've been thinking about it all year and maybe for about 2 years.
And they've been nice and cushy.
That game planning, that game planning can pay off. We've seen it happen. Remember when Pony beat Revolver? That was pure game plan coming to fruition. Will a Colorado or a UBC have a game plan, or a Vermont have a game plan to give problems to this UNC offense? Let's find out.
77% pick rate for UNC to win.
Yeah, well, I said 85%. That seems about where I would project it. I think folks are about right on UNC, wisdom in the crowd. I think they're a little low on the men's team.
Shout out to almost every four seed, every 5 seed has been picked in the women's division to make the finals, including the Money Melons. Someone out there picked the Money Melons to make the finals.
So. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Somebody picked them to win. Probably the same entry, I'm going to assume.
So Keith, you're taking Pleiades as well?
Yeah, Pleiades it is.
There it is. All right. We move over to the men's division. It's time for semis picks. I'll go first this time, Keith. Holy smokes. This is tough. I mean, I feel like I got to map it all out and draw it because I'm wondering
that's what
where the matchups are coming. And you got to make sure that you don't, you got to think about like, okay, UNC is probably going to have to play UMass or Brown in quarters. That's crazy. So let's see. I'm going to take UNC, Cal Poly Slow, Colorado. Who does 2D play? 2D plays 1C and 1B. So if I'm taking UNC, then whoever loses the Pool B matchup, yeah. Jeez. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take Brown. I'm going to take UNC, Brown, Slow, and Colorado. So there you go for chalk, Keith.
Brown, Slow, Colorado. Okay.
This Massachusetts team has a bit of a reputation for not showing up at nationals, and I have too many questions about their health to pick them after they've lost to Brown. I don't know though. That's a very tight game.
It is. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of permutations that make sense here. I mean, that comes with the territory after what we said earlier about it being flat. It does feel like there's a lot of different ways you can break it out. As long as you have UNC, you're golden, right? I'm not even sure after what we've seen from Colorado. I'm not even sure that it's like a lock that they're going to make it to semis.
Pitt could make that. Could take that.
They really could.
And it's also not impossible for me to see Colorado and Pitt both getting through to semis.
So you have Brown winning their? You have Brown winning their pool? No,
I'm picking. I'm picking all the pool winners basically.
Right.
I'm taking Brown to beat UMass and pool play. UMass and Vermont. Yep.
Got it. Interesting. So my picks are actually somewhat similar. Only we flip those two. So I have UNC, Vermont, Colorado, and UMass.
So you're taking the top 4 seeds. Wow.
I am, but I have Pitt beating Colorado in pool play.
And then Colorado beating I don't think it's possible
I've-
what you just described then.
Then Colorado beats Tufts, and then they beat SLO, who won their pool. So I have SLO and Pitt winning their pool, and then I have Vermont and Colorado winning out of pre-quarters into semis.
Wow, that's crazy. So you're picking chalk by way of total lack of chalk.
Yeah, Charlie, there was my earlier iteration had Oregon beating UMass in quarters, so this we had to tone it down. I don't know, man. We say it every year. I come on this podcast and we say it twice a year at Nationals. I feel like you gotta take your L's, you gotta take your lumps before you're ready. And this UMass team hasn't done it. They haven't done it. They haven't been in the crucible and taking those losses. So like I feel like that exposes them to be upset. You know what I mean? If I had a team other than the way that my pools work out, I had Oregon and Texas, one of those two teams in pre-quarters, and then they play UMass. If UMass wins their pool, and just like if it were any other group of teams, I could have talked myself into it, you know?
Okay, so I want to point this out. The crossover, so if you're 2C or 2D and you win your pre-quarter, you then cross over with the other pool. So 2D plays 1C, 2C plays 1D. Now, why does that matter? The teams at the top of those pools, in C, it's Vermont and SLO, and in D, it's Colorado and Pittsburgh. Now, if you go back and you look at my seeding predictions, which I actually have the original predictions that I had where I think were basically perfect. And then USAU like changed the rankings and I rejiggered those teams because it's very difficult to assess which of those teams should be at the top. Because Vermont is 2-0 against Colorado, but they lost to SLO. And SLO has not played Colorado. And they lost to Pitt. Now, Pitt, did Pitt play Vermont? Yes, Pitt lost to Vermont. So these teams have all beaten and lost to each other. And they're all going to be the ones facing off in quarters. And of course, in pool play as well. It's going to be very exciting. And that's why I think it's very difficult. And it's funny that that's how you ended up with those crazy flip-flops happening. And it's mostly because of those teams, you're calling some to lose and then to win the pool and then lose their quarter. And that makes some sense because the matchups might work out that way, that it could feel like a team has a better matchup if they, lose their pool rather than they win it.
Yeah, that it really does. Like, I think that tracks, I think that SLO probably matches up well with Vermont, but Vermont matches up well with Pitt. Like that's kind of how I'm seeing these things play out. And I think SLO doesn't match up as well with Colorado. But I think, Colorado and Pitt, that feels a little coin flippy to me. I think probably I would make Colorado the favorite there, but -1.5, minus something like that. So it's like not drastic. But yes, I do think that grouping is where you get a little mixed up. But Brown also throws a wrinkle into it. I mean, you ended up with Brown. I liked Brown in the beginning of the year. I still can see how they could beat UMass. So there is some room for some extra drama.
Very interesting. Okay, so Keith, who you take in to make the final and win this thing?
All right, let's do it. I got UNC in Colorado.
Okay.
I've talked about UMass. I talked about them not having taken that hit yet. Colorado has. Colorado's been there. They've taken the loss. They know what it's like. They know what it's like to be there in the first place. They've got a lot of experience with that. And I think that they are probably in a position to take down a team like UMass that thrives on depth, when I think that Colorado is just a more athletic outfit. And I think they can play that bully ball if they have to. So I'm taking Colorado in that matchup. And then I don't have to explain a ton about UNC or Vermont. This Vermont team's super feisty, but this again will be a stage that they're not familiar with. And I don't think they have that takeover guy who they could turn to when times get tough. So yeah, I don't think they match up well with UNC.
Gosh, Keith, I'm second guessing myself a little bit. Like the more I think about the potential permutations of the quarterfinals matchups, it's just brutal. Oh man. I think I'm going to make a revision. I'm going to take UNC, Brown, Pittsburgh, and Colorado. I'm not going to take SLO to semis. I think SLO is going to win the pool, but I think they're going to lose to Pitt in quarters. I mean, I absolutely love the matchup for Cal Poly against Vermont in that pool, but I'm not sure I like it as much with them against Pittsburgh. And that's really tough, but that's my final answer. UNC, Brown, Pitt, Colorado. That means that we're going to get a Brown Pitt semi, and we're going to get a UNC Colorado semi. Give me UNC.
Sounds familiar.
I think it's going to be a pretty good game, but I'm going to take UNC. It does sound familiar. And I think this is the year Pitt is going to get back to the finals. I think Pittsburgh is going to beat Brown and get to the finals. And then I've got UNC winning the whole thing. I don't care who they face in the final. They're winning no matter what.
Sad to say. They've got a good matchup with everybody.
they won me over fully at Easterns. They just looked awesome. But as somebody said to me earlier, I'm not accounting for the Easterns curse, and that is true. Maybe that will do them in, Keith.
I hadn't accounted for that either. But didn't we find out that the Eastern's curse is like the first curse that we thought was a curse? Is it really even a curse? So, I feel a little underwhelmed by the voodoo. Yeah, I mean, I've been going back and forth too because I've Pitt and Vermont in quarters, and I picked Vermont to make semis, and like I really could see Pitt getting through, but yeah, I'm gonna stick with my picks. Even it would be fun if we both just switched them up at the last minute.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I mean, it's very hard. It's very hard to pick this year, I think.
Yeah, I don't feel a ton of conviction behind these picks this year, and obviously we've got to put ours down in ink. But I think that there's a lot of different ways this can go. I can't really fault people for coming up with different picks at this point.
I'm fading UMass and Vermont, and they've been so good this season.
But like we said, they're inexperienced in the ways of playing deep into the bracket.
It's true. Very true. Well, there you go. Our picks in the books, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. I think we always say it, but it's like there are always surprises, and there pretty much are always surprises. Last year, the surprise was that there were no surprises, and that the things were pretty chalk. Although I don't think people had Colorado going as close to winning that game against UNC as they ultimately did.
Hey, don't forget about Cal. Don't forget Andrew Roy and Cal.
That was fun. So it will all play out, and you can. We just announced the kind of how to tune in. Things are changing slightly, so I want to just explain what's going on. First of all, we are bringing Field Pass to college nationals for the first time ever, and what that means is that we're going to have a primary stream game, kind of like your typical broadcast with commentary of a single game, multiple cameras. We got the drone. We're going to have some fantastic coverage for you. And then we're also going to have a Field Pass broadcast of 4 different games every round. So that means there's going to be 5 streamed games every round, all the way through pool play, 5 pre-quarter games, and then all 8 quarterfinals will be streamed. And that will all be carried on ultiworld.com. You can get access to everything with a Plus subscription or our new event pack. If you are a full subscriber, you will not get access to the individual Field Pass game streams. You will still get Field Pass, the combined broadcast with commentary, but if you want to watch the individual games in their own feed with natural sound, like you were able to at Club Nationals, you'll need to upgrade to a Plus plan, or you'll need to get the event pack. More details can be found on ultiworld.com with the pricing and a whole breakdown of how it all works. But what it means, Keith, is that literally every team is going to get streamed, and we're going to be able to flex a camera even to games that are not on our primary Field Pass plan. So we could have as many as 5 or even 6 games on Field Pass in a given round, and there are only 8 games at a time. So we're going to be capturing well more than half the games that are played from pool play to quarterfinals. Semifinals and finals coverage is going to get carried by ESPN Plus and ESPNU for the finals. That is a change from last year as well. It will no longer be on ESPN3, but rather on ESPN Plus, which is good for some and bad for others, I think. If you already have an ESPN subscription because you have cable or whatever, now you have to pay separately to get ESPN Plus to watch the semis. However, if you don't have a cable subscription, it's a lot easier to get access to ESPN Plus. You can get it with the Disney Hulu ESPN bundle, or you can just buy it for a month or something like that. But a lot of different ways to kind of tune in. But certainly we're going to try to bring you the best possible coverage that we can from pool play through the quarters. Keith, I'm very excited.
Charlie, it still boggles my mind as somebody who consumes a decent amount of ESPN content and subscribes to both of those things. How confusing the leading media producer for sports is. I mean, like I literally couldn't tell you like what stuff's on Plus and what stuff's on 3, and I think I have both, but I don't know that for sure. It's unreal how confusing it is. Totally unnecessary. Like, you're telling me you can't streamline this in any way? And also, we're getting dangerously close, like a couple of years away, I think, from just running 2 field passes in a live stream, and now boom, all the games are on. We might get there one day. Like, you could see the finish line in a way that we never really. I mean,
especially for college, where there's only 8 games per round, it's not out of the question. Mostly, it's a resource management question. Yes. And I think if you're a fan and you want to watch, and I would encourage you to subscribe, because not only will you get to watch all, the 58 games that we're going to be streaming, but the way that we get to covering everything is with more subscribers, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, the money's not going to come from the clouds, and it's not going to come from USAU.
It's not going to come from our TikTok advertising.
Yeah. And like, sure, there's probably ways we could do it in like a really budget way with like a cell phone stream or something like that. But I don't really think that's where we want to go. So I just encourage you to subscribe and not share logins, and hopefully you see the value in it. And we're super excited because this is the most games that will ever have been streamed from college nationals by quite a distance. So yeah, pumped up. And Keith, look forward to seeing you in a couple days.
Yeah,
I'm already here in Cincinnati. It's hot, and we're ready for some Frisbee.
Yeah, and I'm going to be doing a Miles' birthday video. So on Friday, hit me up. I'll tweet about it. But if you want to come say happy birthday to my 2-year-old, everybody's invited.
Love it. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this live edition of Deep Look. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in here live in the Discord. And we will be back with you for a Out the Back segment where we talk about our #TheGame picks and our #TheGame strategies. And that will be out probably tomorrow. So have a great night, everybody. Keith, safe travels to Cincinnati. And we'll see everybody 8:30 a.m. sharp on Friday for the opening rounds of the college championships. See you there.